Hi, Debbie.
Hi, Luke. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Well, first, I have to tell you, my favorite part of the entire Jungle Cruise is Proxima.
Hey, good stuff.
I am so in love with Proxima, and the work that you and your team at Weta has done is so outstanding. I really thought at certain points that there was a real Jaguar being used.
Cool. Well, thank you very much. It's yeah, good to hear.
You've done such interesting things with Weta over the years. What it strikes me about Jungle Cruise and your work is the amount of light. I'm not used to seeing this much light. Light filtering through the foliage in the forest, light
Yeah.
coming up through the water, especially with the piranha attack. Oh, that's so
Yep.
cool. Um, is this a newer aspect of the VFX for you, or is it because we haven't seen it, and I can't even think of other movies that really have quote unquote exploited the use of light like this before
Mm.
and done so beautifully.
I mean, for me, it's not necessarily that it hasn't been possible before. It's definitely, I think on this show in particular, it was very much the filmmakers were happy for us to push the envelope on it. I think that's probably a better way to describe it. And, like obviously we did a lot of jungle work for this, a lot of environment work for this movie. And, a lot of the components that go into those jungles are very similar. You've got river banks, and you have trees, foliage, fauna and flora. And one of the ways in which the production was very keen on sort of distinguishing as well as sort of varying up the foliage or the plants or the flowers that you saw within it was the sort of the lighting design within each jungle environment. So, we did that sort of very kind of beautiful sunset environment with the lily pads,
Mm-hmm.
which had a lot of that kind of atmospheric mist and things like that. And then you had the rapids, which was incredibly sort of overcast, which is usually something which people lean away from in movie lighting and visual effects, because it always looks very flat. But the filmmakers were very keen from day one that this was the lighting design that they wanted to go with, and that's what we sort of worked with to add in all of that detail. And then the nighttime environments as well with the fireflies and the pucamachuna trees. So there was lots of there was lots of opportunity to explore and come up with cool, creative ways to differentiate between all those different places, so they felt like different places, and that was one of the main sort of mechanisms that we used.
Yeah, I mean, it's beautiful because you really feel like, because anybody that ever, you look at National Geographic photos and images, you look at videos or films, and there's so many different microcosms along the Amazon.
Mm,
So, and I really felt like we were experiencing all of those
yeah.
on this jungle cruise, and it's because of your work, capturing the way light filters through a lot of that foliage or casts light on some of the blossoms, is
Mm,
it looks like Mother Nature has just sun-kissed it all.
yeah. Yeah, cool. That's what we were going for. So I'm glad you liked it.
Where do you even start with a film like Jungle Cruise? Did you get to go on a trip to the Amazon and actually see for yourself, and break things out, do plate work? What was that process like for you coming on board, taking this cruise yourself?
Okay, so yeah, we did get to go to the Amazon. Unfortunately, I didn't get to go to the Amazon. I was still
Ah,
finishing up another project at the time,
ah,
so I had to send. So I had to send one of the reference photographers here, which to this day I'm still kind of bummed about that. Like that would have been such a cool trip to go on, but she was great and she had a great experience. But we sort of chatted a lot about the kind of things that we really were interested in, and while she was out there, the things that we wanted to take a look at and photograph. But there's so much to be said about looking at and experiencing these things firsthand, for sure. But obviously, since I couldn't do that physically myself, I had to kind of live vicariously through her. But she brought back some fantastic reference, which really did form kind of the building blocks and the plan, I guess, for starting to flesh out all of these environments. And a lot of the time we couldn't use the plates directly because there was components that weren't quite right with them, but it gave us really good sort of visual maps, I suppose, for how we needed to lay things out. These plants live in the water like this, these lily pads sit like that, and you get these kinds of trees, and this is sprinkled with these, and at the edges of the banks it looks like this. So it gave us like incredible detail and reference to match that you normally wouldn't get that kind of level from just looking at pictures on the internet. So that really did become a good springboard for us to start building out and creating these environments, but always keeping one eye on reality so that we can just make sure that everything's always anchored. Even though obviously there's quite a lot of fantastical components to the movie, we always wanted to make sure that a lot of it was as anchored in reality as possible.
yeah, I'm telling you, Disney needs to bring you guys in to actually work on the actual Jungle Cruise ride.
Yeah. I still haven't been on it. I've been to Disneyland a couple of times, and I've never actually been on the Jungle Cruise ride. But it's on my bucket list the next time I go there. And everyone's like, it's not that great.
It's beyond fun, and of course, anybody that has been on the Jungle Cruise ride with all the lame puns and
Yeah.
that your tour guides do, all of that is jam packed in the opening of the film. So for anybody
Yeah.
anyone that loves the ride, it sets them up to love the film. If you see the film and you hear all that, it's going to make you want to go to Disneyland on the ride. So for my money, it's a win-win either way.
Yeah, absolutely.
But how early on did you and your team get involved in this? Because there's so many elements to Jungle Cruise, and I know there are multiple digital company, VFX companies
Yeah.
like Weta involved. So I'm curious about what technology did you guys have? How early did you come in? What set you guys apart to handle this waterwork and Proxima and a few of the other things?
Well, I mean, in terms of when we started on the project, it would have been just after they wrapped principal photography. So they were just getting into doing these additional shoot, kind of splinter plate shoots and reference shoots. So taking the water's a good example. They did a plate shoot in Colorado, I think, of a rapids over there, which the intention was to hopefully try and use some of that plate photography for the rapid sequence. But when that footage came back, we realized quite early on that it wasn't the scale that was required by the filmmakers. Like, it was great reference, and it gave us a really good insight into how rapids looked and how they worked, but we wouldn't be able to use it directly because the river would have been too narrow, and once you put the boat in there, then it didn't look that dangerous anymore. So that we were involved in quite early, and from a technology point of view, I guess we had to be involved in quite early because as a sort of a computing undertaking, that rapid sequence was pretty intense. It required like a huge amount of water to be simulated, and I couldn't really appreciate it actually from the start of the task as to quite how vast that would be, but because the water starts off at one end, so we had to basically create a computer simulation of this entire rapids from start to finish that would run over a minute long or something like that. And that really, we've got some pretty powerful computers here at Weta, but that really did push the limits of what we could do. And we'd sort of place the rocks in the water, we'd place everything underneath the water, and then we'd sort of hit the button and run all these simulations on top of it, and hope that what we got out the other end would be what we wanted. And then we didn't really get any creative notes on it, because any big changes to the river would require 2 more week turnaround time to just to simulate a new river. So it was pretty intense. And one other thing I've often said about the river is water is one of those things which scales really badly. So you have to get the detail into it, otherwise the whole thing feels too small. It feels miniature. And so we had to sort of develop some technology to be able to blend in high res stuff depending on where the camera was within the sequence, to be able to get that detail and to be able to sell the scale of it. And it's probably one of the things that I'm most pleased with in that sequence, is just the level of detail that we were able to get to, with like the foam, the bubbles under the water, like all the various components that make up that environment. It works really well. Like it was such a cool sequence to be a part of.
Yeah, the white water part of the rapids, I was amazed. And as you were just now talking, my mind immediately went, even before you talked about the bubbles and the foam, I immediately was envisioning that white water again in my head, because it is so standout and so real. For anybody that's ever seen any kind of rapids, big or small, that water does have its own proprietary viscosity, so to speak. And it really comes through here on film. You really did a wonderful, wonderful job with the water work, and particularly those rapids. I don't know what I love more, the detail of the water work, the lighting, or Proxima. It's a tough call. It's a tough call, Luke. You're using the blend of the Houdini and the Manuka renderer on this?
No, this was entirely Manuka rendered, but it was simulated in Houdini. So the simulation took place in Houdini, and then it was handed off to. So we got a bit of a proprietary step in between, which blended all of the simulations together, and then that was all rendered in Manuka.
Wow! Now, is this the biggest push, the most taxing that you guys have given the Manuka to render? Because I know it was first used a number of years ago for The Hobbit, and then also on Dawn of Planet of the Apes for the hair.
Yep.
Because it worked, but this seems like this was really, this pushed it to its limit. Yeah,
absolutely. It's this was very taxing. I mean, the one thing which actually did help in terms of, there's one of the things with that river as well that you don't quite realize is the amount of stuff that's going on under the water that's going on top of the water. Like there's a lot of stuff, and light actually does penetrate further down. So you get the detail. A lot of the detail that you get in the river is stuff that you're seeing underneath the water, not just the stuff that's on top. And that's where Manuka and just path tracing renderers in general, that's where they sort of trip up, because that's where the complexity is as soon as the light has to pass through into semi-transparent things like water or glass or things like that, it starts to crank the complexity through the roof. So, and this was even more insane, because you would get light would pass through the foam into bubbles into the water. Like there were multiple levels of which that had to all resolve itself.
Wow. And of course, you also did the waterfall sequences where in the cove. You did the above ground waterfall sequences in the cove where we've got the underground puzzle lock that Ian Seabrook came in and shot. Because I have to say, I've already talked to Ian about his underwater work and the lighting and the challenges he faced underwater that have to come in from above. But you also need that cohesiveness and that continuity of your lighting so it matches. So I love how the seamlessness of what we're seeing above the water with what he's got happening under the water.
Yeah, so that we actually did normally those would be two different things, you know, like you'd have the underwater thing and as one world, and then you'd have the above water thing as another world. But because the water drains, you end up seeing both, you know, and,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you end up with both environments. So we actually had to build the whole thing as one giant funnel, I guess, as you would call it. Then once we got into the water, it was obviously creating a look whilst you were under the water to make sure it matched back to all the plate photography, but that it actually still keyed back into above the water. And as the water drops as well, to make sure that those three pieces all kind of connect back together again. So that was definitely one of the trickier challenges because there's sort of three connected components, but they were all created in sort of isolation that we had to kind of bring all together for that moment.
Yeah, because that cove area
Mm.
and the waterfalls is just beautiful on its own. But then when, as you said, when you have the water rising and falling and the puzzle piece,
Yeah.
essentially, I know it was being hoisted on by cranes. And
Mm.
poor Ian had all the pressure of 85 pounds of camera gear on him as he's coming up in the water. But
Yeah.
it's very seamless so that the water texture is, because that's generally, that can be a big giveaway, is is that
Yeah.
water texture that something is
Mm.
not matching, and it's perfect.
Yeah. We there were a few shots where we had to match back into the photograph water, and those were very tricky in terms of getting that match, and we definitely iterated a few times to try and get it so that you wouldn't be able to tell where one started and where one finished.
Yeah, just beautifully done. So now talk to me about my beloved Proxima and all those other animals. You didn't just, there's more than just Proxima. Everybody else
Yeah.
just gets a little 1 second pop on, but
It's funny. I watched the movie last night and I'd forgotten how much we created for it. There's a lot. There's the monkeys in the market near the start of the movie. You've
mm-hmm,
got the toucans in the cage as well. The piranha, obviously, that attacked Dwayne, and then within the jungle environments, there's a whole load of different sort of pieces of motion: monkeys, butterflies, macos, toucans. Like there's a lot that's in every single shot. We would always try and jam pack as much life as we could into the jungle, and a lot of the time it's quite subtle, but it's there. Like if it's not there, you miss it, but if it's there, you just take it as part of being part of the jungle, you know. So that's sort of the general kind of creature work, but obviously Proxima was sort of the star of the show in terms of the creature work that we did. And you know, she's a character in herself, and you know, one of the biggest sort of challenges was trying to walk the tightrope of creating a character who was ultimately, you know, a real jaguar. She didn't need to talk. Luckily, but yeah, but she still needed to perform things which jaguar wouldn't normally do. And she had to also create that. You had to create that personality, and that was kind of the thing. It was sort of, you know, you couldn't just create a pure jaguar because it wouldn't she wouldn't have the personality that she needed. So one of the things that we had to do was when we were trying to create this personality was look at, you know, we looked at taking cues from dogs as well. Obviously, Frank and Proxima's relationship is obviously a very close one, like man's best friend. So, you know, we sort of took some cues from that. We also looked at sort of house cats, lions, tigers, all sorts, just to kind of take little snippets of bits that we could sprinkle in there to help with her connection with the actors and give her that sort of personality.
yeah, she has a really wonderful personality, just like the monkeys at the beginning of the film running through the marketplace. And that's something that Weta has always done so well. And I think one of the greatest examples is in the Apes series of really bringing out the personalities
For sure.
of animals. And here, I love that you mentioned looking at dogs because there's a lot of Proxima that is very much like a dog in the way she goes into her little cage, the way she comes out, the very dog like I
Yeah.
want to please my master or my
Yeah.
my human. And you see a lot of that. But I also noticed I'm looking at when Frank is rubbing her head, touching her head, and talking
Yeah.
about Proxima, and she's not the first, and he goes into his whole history with
Yeah.
Lily about the other animals, so we get to see the black leopard and all these other iterations. The hair. Weta does hair and animal fur like nobody else. The eyes and the hair are
Yeah.
stunning. And to actually see his hand like running through the coarse hair on the top of Proxima's
Mm.
head, and see it move like coarse
Yeah.
short hair would be. That little
Mm.
detail, it just stands out in my mind on seeing that. It's just wonderful.
And that is was one of the challenges with her is short hair like that is one of the hardest sort of sells.
Mm-hmm.
Long hair is a lot easier because you get a lot of detail with it and it's quite easy to move it around. But when you get shorter with it, it becomes a much harder task to look convincing as well. And yeah, that was people we put a lot of effort into those shots to sort of really sell that kind of level of interaction. And it's not even just the hair; it's when he rubs her scalp. We also had to make the skin underneath his hand slide back and forth as well, because it kind of slides against the scalp when you stroke a dog or an animal's head. Like, so there's two simulations going on. You got the fur itself moving, and then you got the skin underneath, which is moving the larger kind of mass as well. So it's those two components that really kind of sell that connection.
And then because she's a jaguar and she is spotted, you also have to worry about the color movement of the spots.
Yeah, yeah. There was a lot of sort of tuning of that. There's and with the spots as well. You've obviously got the pattern of them in themselves, but with the fur on top of that, it's there's actually two sort of layers of fur. You've got a very short layer, which is the majority, and then you've got these long guard hairs that sort of go over the top of it, and those are what give the spots that kind of smeared look, that look like they're not totally sharp. They're kind of smeared along the directions the hair runs. And so that was another thing we sort of ended up tuning quite a lot, is to try and give her that look so she didn't feel completely brand new, like she felt like she had some history to her. But that it also felt like she was real, and that was one of the components that we ended up sort of tuning quite a lot, just to give us that level of kind of realness, but without it looking too fluffy. That was always the kind of the trade-off. Yeah.
Yeah, she doesn't look fluffy. She looks very sleek, very sleek and stealthy, which is something else with her movement. You have her moving not like she's a spring chicken, but that her muscles are built up, so she's had a while to buff her body. And I like that because it really plays into the legend of Frank and the story, so that she's not moving like she's a young cat. She's got some wear on her. She may have a little arthritis here and there. You get up there in age. But all those little details really add so much, because she is such an important character in this film. And I really appreciated that.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, one of the things is it's almost a bit of a story point. I mean, when Frank talks about the backstory and the cats that he's had along the way, is we definitely wanted to make it feel like these guys have been together for a while. Like, it wasn't like he just found Proxima like 2 weeks earlier kind of thing. Like, they'd already spent a number of years together. So that's why we sort of lent into an older cat rather than it being, very young and fresh and sort of, active and excited. Like, giving her a little bit more attitude, I guess, as it were, kind of helps sell that they've been through a lot together, and they've been together for a long time.
Yeah, really, really well done. How many of these disciplines were you working on concurrently? or did you try and finish up water work and then move on to Proxima and then move on to the jungle, or did you have your teams working on everything concurrently?
Yeah, everything concurrently. Like, so we were developing everything at the same time. Obviously, it's different people with different specialities doing different bits, but yeah, working on everything just to sort of bring it up to the level required. And also, one thing sort of helps inform the other. Like when we were sort of starting to show Proxima for the first time, one thing I was quite keen on is, to put her into a jungle context. She never actually ended up in the jungle in the movie, but we sort of created a little scene for her so that when we showed her, we could show her actually in the environment of which you would expect to see a jaguar. And that really helps as well. So that kind of allows us to kind of double down, because you not only are you showing what the jungle looks like, you're showing what the jaguar looks like, and you're putting them together as though it's like a shot from a BBC documentary, and that really does also help to sell the realism. If people look at it and think that it feels like a documentary, then you know that both the jungle and the cat are working. So that was something that we did, and it paid off.
How closely do you work with the director? Did you work with Jammo on this one? Did you have a lot of autonomy in terms of infusing that personality and those traits to give a personality? Even those piranhas, they have a personality.
Yeah, they did. Yeah,
a very rapid fire one, but they have one. So I'm curious, how much was left to you and your team to figure out and develop the jungle personality, Proxima's personality, the monkey's personality? Or was Jammo, is he one of those directors that says, no, I want it to be this, I want it to be this, I want it to be that?
He was very good he was very good, actually. I really enjoyed working with Jammo, because what I found is that he hadn't in the past had a huge amount of experience with visual effects, which actually, to my mind, was an advantage, because he didn't start telling us things about what to do to the visual effects. He started giving us notes like a director would direct an actor, and that was what was really useful, is that we would talk through the work, and he would describe what he wants, what the sort of the emotion of it is, what the attitude is of the people, the reactions and things like that. So rather than sort of getting into, I want her foot to be here on this frame, he never did things like that. It was always about kind of as though he treated her like she was an actor, and this is how he wanted her to perform in the shot. And then it was really over to us. So we filled in all the details and all of the nuances and the subtlety to be able to convey what he wanted, but really, that was how the relationship worked, and that was great, because it gave us quite a lot of freedom, but obviously we were ultimately trying to satisfy his vision. So that was kind of the relationship.
And I'm guessing the similar worked for creating the jungle itself.
Yeah, the jungle. I mean, he was just super pumped from day one. The jungles were looking real, and they looked like they were there, and that's what more could you want? Like he was really really happy with how that stuff came out. Everyone was, and me too as well. Like it was even watching it again recently, I was like, when you're at the point where you're even forgetting the background, because it's just a given as to what it is. You're watching the acting and the performance and the story unfold before you. The rest of it just kind of falls away, and I know when I've done my job well is when that's what happens, and that's what it was like, which is nice. You sort of forget about what you're watching, and you know that they can't actually be in the jungle, but you sort of suspend that disbelief and just enjoy the story, and that was my sort of main takeaway from the movie. Is like, normally with these things, you're always watching it with a slightly professional eye and going, oh, we could have done that bit better, or no, I'm not too happy about that bit. But I found that I actually just sat back and enjoyed the movie, which was great.
Now, did you and your team also do the life-giving tree and the blossom?
No, that was a different company that did that stuff.
How rude! They should have let you do it. It's jungly.
They would have liked to, but unfortunately, it would have been too much for us to take on as well.
So, at the end of the day, how many visual effect shots do you have in this film? Any idea?
I can ballpark is about 800, 750 to 800. But yeah, I mean, we probably worked on more shots than that, but obviously, as the edit evolves, things end up on the cutting room floor. But I think in the movie it was about 750, something.
Wow. Wow.
Mm.
So now that the film is out there in the world and fans are loving it, I admit I've already seen it twice.
Cool.
And I will see it again because I just think it's so much fun. What about this particular challenge of craftsmanship? What are you most proud of? What pushed you the most that you will now be able to take forward into a future film when you can raise your hand and say, I can do that now?
Mm. I mean, obviously, all the experiences along the way, and this is going to sound a little bit weird, but the thing that I actually take most away from this movie, and I think why the work was as successful as it is we had such a great team here at Weta. Even now, even though the movie for us at Weta wrapped a year ago and it's only coming out in the cinema, the people who worked on that film, we still chat now about it, you know, and everyone looks back very fondly on those days. And I think for me, that was a huge component of it. You know, obviously we've got sort of the various creative problems and the technological problems along the way, but those things, as you gain more experience, you just combat those things as in which they come. But the thing which I really took away from it is that everyone really had fun on this one. And now that we've all sort of disbanded and moved on to new projects, a lot of us kind of look back very nostalgically on this project and kind of, you know, would love to kind of get back together again. I think that's the thing, is like trying to create that, as long as internally we can create that that sort of environment here where people are having fun and they will naturally make awesome looking work. And that was one of my big takeaways from this. Even, you know, Jim Burney, the visual effects supervisor, he said one client called to us, it's like, you guys make this easy, you guys make this fun. And that was such a great compliment because, you know, that's what we were trying to do.
Look, it's the wonders of Weta and the magic of Disney all come together. Little bit of Tinkerbell's fairy dust sprinkled over everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, Luke, this has been so wonderful to get to talk to you about Jungle Cruise. I am such a huge fan of all the work that Weta does on films, and it's always such a privilege to talk to all of you. But I have to say, I'm going to admit it, your work on this one, I think, is one of my all-time favorites.
Oh, thank you.
Oh,
that's very kind.
Oh, thank you, Luke. And I hope I get to talk to you again in the future about another project.
I'm sure we will.
Oh, Luke, thanks so much. You go have a great rest of your day.
You too, Debbie. It's been great talking to you. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.